First tonight, why Loughborough is a new front line in the government's controversial plans to tackle illegal immigration. It's the site of a Home Office reporting centre where several people were detained last week despite protests by campaigners. Well, one Afghan army officer who had to sign in there has told us he's in fear of being sent to Rwanda despite fighting side by side with British forces. The government says the new law will deter small boat crossings. But this programme's heard claims that it's already driving asylum seekers underground. Our social affairs correspondent Jeremy Ball reports.
Obi and Sardar both risked their lives with UK forces in Afghanistan, but here in Nottinghamshire, they're facing very different futures.
He was in a hotel.
Obi was invited to resettle here legally because he worked for the British Army. But as an Afghan army officer, Sardar didn't qualify, so he came here on a small boat.
He came to seek protection. He worked alongside with the British forces in Afghanistan. End of the day, the mission was same for everybody.
Sardar brought these photos and a glowing reference to prove his record supporting Western forces, evidence he'd been seriously injured and fled after being targeted at home. It's evidence he could have used to claim refugee status here if he'd arrived just a few months earlier. And it's a role that several former British military chiefs campaigned to exempt from the Rwanda plan. But instead, Sardar's been warned that he could now be removed from the country, so he has to sign in regularly at an immigration reporting centre.
It's very scary, very stressful. Maybe I get in and they arrest me and don't let me to get back out. I come here just for save my life. I want to stay here and work and support myself. I'm very scared, but that's the rule.
At the building in Loughborough where Sardar signs in, refugee campaigners are taking everyone's details and handing out advice on who to call if they are detained. They say they've been supporting desperate friends and relatives who've been breaking down in tears outside.
I feel very strongly, and I've got to know people. They've fled because they're in fear for their lives. And I can't stand by and let this happen.
I don't deny that there are some people who don't have a claim to be here, but I think we should treat everybody with humanity, and the language being used about them is just appalling.
But why wouldn't the threat of being sent to Rwanda deter people from coming on small boats?
People do not have options while they are dealing with the smugglers. They have got weapons, they are violent to the people, so they don't come here by choice.
But you know, the government would say you haven't got a right to be here. What do you say to that?
I feel like this is a political game. They are putting the asylum seekers in just to get some votes in the election, and I feel like the English people are very aware.
This is where hopes and dreams and futures collide with the politics of immigration. The Home Office says it's detaining people in preparation for the first flights to Rwanda in what it calls a landmark policy to stop the boats and tackle illegal migration. So, do people here at Loughborough Market think it's going to work?
Do it, but don't hang about. Just put them straight on the planes, take them if they're not here properly. That's it, out.
Everybody deserves life. Is it all about money?
No, it won't work. We've got to stop it at the source, innit? In France. That's where they've got to stop it.
And back at the immigration centre last week, protesters blocked this enforcement van. Support groups say 8 people have already been detained here, and one man in Leicester says it's pushing him under the radar.
I am very afraid. I cannot sleep in my home because maybe police one time come catch me. I live homeless now in the street.
Now campaigners are counting everyone out of the immigration reporting centre, and the asylum seekers who don't emerge could be on Rwanda flights within weeks.
Well, Jeremy's here in the studio with us now. Jeremy, people on all sides feel very strongly about the Rwanda plan, don't they? Why has the government fought so hard to push this through?
Because this has been such a big priority for Rishi Sunak. What is happening now in Loughborough is really right at the heart of his pledge to stop the boats. And the government's convinced this is going to work because something quite similar to this succeeded in Australia several years ago. Now, it is controversial, though, because what it means is that it won't just be failed asylum seekers who get flown out to Rwanda. A lot of genuine refugees will end up there too, and that's because that's where their claims are going to be considered. And importantly, that's where they'll stay.
But why is that controversial?
Because this essentially means this country opting out of the international rules on granting asylum. Ministers say, though, look, what is the alternative? Nothing else has stopped these boat crossings, and they argue there is a strong moral case too, because people are drowning in the channel, of course, and the government also argues that it's going to huge lengths to make sure that people will be safe and supported out in Rwanda. Those arguments, though, hugely contentious.
We heard in your report about the man that was going under the radar. Is there any other evidence that this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, these detentions do already seem to be deterring people from signing in at Loughborough. I've spoken to refugee groups in both Nottingham and Derby who are so worried about that. They are now advising people not to miss their appointments because that could actually jeopardise their asylum claims. I also spoke about this to Sardar, the former Afghan army officer. Now, he says he is going to still keep on signing in, but he said when he went there last week, instead of the usual long queues, he was in and out in 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. And he said that's because hardly anybody else had turned up.
Yeah. OK, well, Jeremy, thank you very much for that. Thank you.